Daniel Sports Central, we go over a college football game preview and prediction on the Big Ten championship matchup between the Michigan Wolverines and the Purdue Boilermakers. Both teams have had outstanding seasons getting to this point. You got Michigan, who is 12-0 on the season, one of 3 undefeated teams remaining, and they're coming off of their massive win over Ohio State. They beat the Buckeyes last week, and Michigan is in the Big Ten championship game for the second straight week. And the Wolverines, with a win here, they clinch a spot in the college football playoff for the second straight season. And honestly, at this point, I think Michigan is pretty much a lock for the college football playoff. But obviously, you clinch a spot in that top 4 if you beat Purdue in this game. And the Boilermakers are a team not to be underestimated. They have proven in the past that they can be a team to upset big-name programs. And Purdue, in the end, this team is 8-4, the Big Ten West champion. Should make for a great matchup in the Big Ten title game. We'll be going over a full game preview and prediction on this matchup here today, starting with the team trends. Michigan beat Ohio State 45-23 was the final score. What a win there for Michigan to take down their rival Ohio State. That was a game that was so anticipated all season. I think we all knew that Michigan-Ohio State game in Week 13 was going to determine the Big Ten East once again, and it definitely did. And Michigan, they beat Ohio State 45-23. That fourth quarter was incredible for Michigan. Ohio State was just crumbling there in the last few minutes of that game, and Michigan took advantage. They were scoring touchdowns left and right, and the Wolverines got the win. That's definitely a very memorable game, that's for sure, for most of you Wolverine fans. And Michigan 12-0. This team is ranked second in the AP poll. I personally have Michigan now ranked as number 1 in my top 25 for this week. We'll see where they are ranked in the college football playoff rankings come Tuesday. But if I were to predict, I would say Michigan is going to be at number 2 as well in the college football playoff rankings. As for Purdue, this team beat Indiana 30-16. So a solid win for them to finish out the season, but they're kind of in a different position, obviously, than Michigan is. Purdue, they won the Big Ten West, which was an extremely messy division this season. The Big Ten West, you had Purdue and Illinois and Iowa and Minnesota and Wisconsin who were in the top 5. Honestly, it could have been any of those 5 teams to win the division, but in the end, Purdue was 6-3 in conference, and that was enough to win the division for Purdue. And so they're 8-4 overall heading into this matchup. Once again, 6-3 in conference. And you had Illinois and Iowa who weren't far behind. Looked like Iowa was going to win that division once again, but turns out the Hawkeyes lost to Nebraska in Week 13, so that opened the door for Purdue to get into Indianapolis. I think this is the first time that Purdue has ever been in the Big Ten title game, so a great opportunity for the Boilermakers here. Games be on Saturday, December 3rd in Indianapolis, Indiana, and your kickoff is 8 p.m. Eastern. Spread's going Michigan by 16, so not surprising seeing the Wolverines favored by just about 2 touchdowns and a field goal here. Over-unders 51. And the FPI is also going Michigan 89%. So the Wolverines are a heavy favorite here. Series history, Michigan leads at 45-14. Michigan has won 4 straight. Last time Purdue won was in 2009. Obviously, both teams have been in separate divisions for a while, so we haven't seen these two teams play each other all that often, but Michigan has won the past 4 when they have. And once again, last time the Boilermakers knocked off Michigan was in 2009. So it's been right about 13 years since Purdue last beat Michigan. Stat comparison for this one, Michigan is all around an outstanding team. They're 5th in points per game, 2nd in points allowed, especially on defense. This team, that's really where this team shines. They're a really good rushing team too. Blake Corum obviously is the big name on this offense. He's rushed for nearly 1,500 yards this season and 18 touchdowns. We knew he was going to be a playmaker heading into the season, but he has really had a great season for this team, and he is extremely talented. J.J. McCarthy looked really good against Ohio State. He is obviously the expectations for him are very high, being a 5-star high school recruit, and he is so far really impressed. 2,200 yards on the season, 17 touchdowns, 2 picks as well, so his stats are overall pretty good so far this season. And obviously the top in receiving, there's a few receivers here, but Ronnie Bell is the top in receiving, right around 700 yards and 2 touchdowns on the season to this point. So Michigan is a great team on offense, especially in the rushing game. And defensively, they're also an outstanding team, only allowing 13 points a game, which puts them as 2nd in the country. And they're especially good in the rushing defense. They are tied for 1st in the rushing defense, allowing only 84 rush yards a game. So it's going to be tough for Purdue to rush against Michigan here, that's for sure. They're 84th in passers a game, which is the one weak spot you could say for this team, but overall they're doing just fine in the rushing game to cover for that. As for Purdue, they're 72nd in points per game, 40th in points allowed. This team isn't quite as good statistically. That's kind of expected. They are 21st in passers a game. That's the main strength for this team, is in the passing game. Aiden O'Connell is an excellent quarterback, a very accurate quarterback for that matter. He's passed for 3,100 yards, 22 touchdowns, has thrown 11 picks this year. But, I mean, overall, he's a great quarterback and very accurate for that matter. Charlie Jones is the top in receiving, 1,200 yards and 12 touchdowns on the year. And they've also got Devin Mockabee, who's the top in rushing with right around 900 yards on the season and 8 touchdowns as well. So a solid offense here in the skill players for Purdue, even though they don't have a whole lot of depth. Recent matchups: Michigan beat Ohio State 45-23, beat Illinois 19-17. So, I mean, this team they've been dominant down the stretch. They beat Nebraska 34-3, beat Rutgers 52-17, also beat Michigan State 29-7. So you could say that Illinois game, they maybe weren't very dominant in that game. Illinois really hung around to that matchup, but in the end, Michigan did get the win. That's what matters. And honestly, for both Michigan and Ohio State, they're week 12 games for both teams. Ohio State played Maryland. Both games were way closer than they should have been. And I think it's just because both teams were very much looking forward to the game in Week 13. But as for Purdue, they beat Indiana 30-16. They beat Northwestern 17-9. Beat Illinois, the 21st ranked team in the country at the time, 31-24. And they lost to Iowa before that, 3-24. That's why Purdue was in danger of losing their spot in the Big Ten title game if Iowa did beat Nebraska this weekend, because Hawkeyes would hold the advantage or the tie-breaking advantage, but in the end didn't have to come to that, which is great for Purdue. They also lost to Wisconsin back in late October, 24-35. Your key points for this one: Michigan 12-0, dominated Ohio State in the fourth quarter last week. That was, once again, quite a fourth quarter, quite a second half for Michigan there. And I mean, that game was close. Ohio State was hanging on, but it looked like Michigan, there was just a time where Michigan was able to take control of that game, and even though Ohio State hung on for a while, Michigan managed, and they were just simply the better team. That's definitely a way you could put it. And they've become a major national contender. Now, I was saying this in my rankings video for this week, my top 25. Michigan has now become, this team is very much a team that I can now see winning a national title. I mean, it was that Michigan-Ohio State game where that was obviously very anticipated, because the winner of that game would be in a great position for the college football playoff and potentially national title. And here we are. I think Michigan and Georgia especially, those are probably your top two teams in the country right now. I mean, it's probably either going to be Georgia or Michigan to win the national title this season, and I think Wolverines are potentially the more complete team. We could see Michigan win a national title this season. That is very much within reason at this point. They're a brutal, dominant team. Purdue managed to win the Big Ten West with 8 wins. Once again, a very messy division this season, that's for sure. And but yeah, Purdue came out on top with 8 wins. They're still a talented team. Should not be underestimated. I mean, once again, you look back at last season, they were called the spoiler makers for a reason. This team, they beat the number 2 ranked team in the country multiple times last year, Iowa and Michigan State. But that was last year. This is this year, but this team is still very experienced, and they've still got many players from last season. That's why this team has been as good as they are. It's because of the experience that they have. And so this is a talented team that should not be underestimated. That said, let's get to the prediction here for Michigan and Purdue, the Big Ten title game. And in this matchup, I'm going to go with Michigan to pull off the win here. 34-17 is my predicted final score. I've got Michigan actually covering the spread here. It's currently 16 points towards the Wolverines. I think based on last week, maybe there's a chance that Michigan, there's a little bit of hangover from last week into this week. Maybe it's a bit of a slow start. But, I mean, if you look at how this team dealt with the Ohio State win last year, they ended up just destroying Iowa in the Big Ten title game. And you can sometimes get into trouble looking at results from years past, but I think Michigan is genuinely the better team here. And, I mean, they handle the pressure just fine. I mean, if you look at last week, they went to Columbus, beat Ohio State the way that they did. This team will handle the pressure just fine in this matchup, and I've got them winning this matchup 34-17. Could potentially be a bigger blowout, but I do think Purdue hangs around a bit, maybe keeps this game somewhat close in the first half. But I think Michigan pulls away and they win this game by a couple of touchdowns. So I'll say 65% towards Michigan. I would be very surprised if Purdue won this game, even though it's still a possibility. If there's any Big Ten West team right now that could be Michigan, I'd say it would be Purdue. But the over-under is 51. Give me the over for this one. And once again, Michigan covered the spread in the end. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below on this matchup. And I appreciate you guys watching as always. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. Catch you on the next one.